All right. Well, this is the final video post for a series that I was doing on brewing equipment for the beginner. And this last video is going to talk about hydrometer readings, how to take one and what you're looking for and things like that. And this is something that a lot of folks, especially new or old, have problems with. They're not comfortable with it, they don't know the process, things like that. If you're not familiar, if you haven't watched the other parts of the series, my name is Mike Campbell. I am with a company called beerloons.com. We manufacture products for the home brewer and... No, sorry. Just in case. That's Simcoe. Simcoe's trying to jump on me right now because he wants a little attention. Sorry about that. Simcoe is our kind of assistant brewer for a lot of this. But anyway, we'll move it over here so at least hopefully he doesn't do that. But as far as it goes, hydrometer reading, one will tell you the amount of alcohol that your beer has. Now you take two readings to get the actual alcohol percentage. There's really not an accurate device made to take a reading once the beer is done, the alcohol's been created. You take one before the creation of the alcohol and then one just before bottling. But the big thing that hydrometers do is if you suspect there might be an issue with the fermentation, now you have a reference point. You have your starting gravity, or original gravity as it may be called. And if you're going through fermentation, you go, boy, I don't know if this fermented right, or if it fermented all the way, or whatever, it was really quick, or really doesn't look like it's doing anything. Take a hydrometer reading, and it'll tell you. Now, real quick, and I'm going to try to keep this real quick for everyone, because this can get lengthy, but as far as it goes, we have here a hydrometer and hydrometer test jar. This here's the hydrometer. And on the hydrometer, there's three sets of numbers. Now, the numbers that we're concerned about are what they call the gravity scale. So that's this set of numbers. It starts with 1.000, goes 10, 10, 10, 20, 10, 30, 10, 40, and then there's individual 2-degree lines in between. So 1040, 1042, 1044, 1046, 1048, 1050. All right? Because I know this is out of focus and I can't do much about that, sorry, but that at least you have some idea how to read these. As the numbers go up, or the numbers are going up, the higher this is out of the liquid. Now, what hydrometers do is they measure the amount of weight in the water. They're not specifically measuring sugar. They're measuring the weight of the water. Now, in our case, we are measuring sugar because that's what's causing most of the weight in here. And this is a hydrometer test jar. This is not what the hydrometer comes in. That is just a protective case that does nothing else than help protect the hydrometer. You need a separate item called a hydrometer test jar to take care of your reading. This is the best way to do a sample. You can use wine thieves, or they're now just called the thief now. Those work, but they can be somewhat hard to hold upright and not have the hydrometer move around. But whatever your preference is, makes no difference. So what we're doing is we're taking our hydrometer, making sure it's kind of free from all the sides, and just spin it around, make sure there's no bubbles or anything catching on this. And what I'm doing is I want to look for where the beer or wort crosses the line, and at that line, that's where I take my reading. I look across, see where it's at, which in my case on this one is 1042. Now, if you were to leave this in your fermenter or whatever, as the yeast ate the sugars, this would actually go down. So if you do a real big beer, it may go way up. It just depends on the type of beer you're making. But in my case, I'm at 1.042 or 1042. Now, keep in mind that would be the temperature at 60 degrees. There is a compensation you need to do the warmer it gets, but the hydrometers come with those, or just look online for hydrometer compensation or hydrometer temp compensation, something like that. So now I know my starting gravity at 1.042 or 1042. I would come back closer to bottling time, assuming everything is okay. And I'll have a final gravity reading, I would say about 10-10 is real common, 10-12 with a beer. So I take that reading, and through the wonders of math, of which the equations are all over the internet, you figure out what your actual percentage reading is. So I believe in that case you're probably looking at about a 4.5% range. I'm just doing the math in my head. So if everything goes as planned, that's where I should end up. So now you know your alcohol percentage. But the big thing is, let's say I have my 1042. I'm coming down here, my beer doesn't look like it's fermenting right, everything's a little funky. I take another hydrometer reading and I'm at 1020. All right, well, I know the yeast started, so we knew the yeast was active at one point, but we're not low enough, we're not as low as we should be for this beer. So what do? Well, the yeast stopped, and then first and foremost, if the yeast stops, which is really, really rare these days, it's usually due to a temperature change, a dramatic temperature change. See it a lot in the spring and the fall. And I know a lot of people go, well, my house stays the same temp year-round, and I get it, but no, it doesn't. When it's 85 degrees out like it is today, this house feels much different than when it's 10 below out in the middle of January in Minnesota. And that also affects the yeast itself. So temperature is really the big thing. Sudden change, 30-degree change. In that case, usually you just have to get the wort into a warmer location. If you try that in an 80-degree location or on a floor that's got heating in it and it's 80 degrees and nothing's happening, okay, we have a little bit more serious problem. The yeast is not kicking back in, it's not working. Then we just add some more yeast. And I will point this out because I think it gets missed a lot lately over the last couple of years because of how consistent yeast has become. Have yeast on hand. Dry yeast, whatever. Dry yeast will last forever. I know it's got a 2-year date on it. That doesn't mean anything. It's freeze-dried. You can't kill this stuff. You can use it 15 years from now. So just be aware. Always have yeast on hand. An extra packet or two just in case fermentation stops. And I want to point this out. Most times it's not the homebrew supply company's fault that your yeast didn't start. You may want to think that. I've worked with yeast way, way too long to sit there and go, it's the brew shop. I've used yeast 2 years out of date. Now, granted, you shouldn't be getting yeast that out of date, and I'm not aware of any companies that do that. But I tried everything I can over the years with yeast to kill it, and the only thing that ever worked was throwing it in the microwave for a few minutes. So be aware, it's pretty rare that the problem is coming from where you got it from. The extreme heat can cause some issues, but that is why you have an extra yeast packet on hand. Don't get through making your beer, throw the yeast in, and then if it doesn't work, have no backup plan. The yeast packet are like $1, all right? Pick one up. They will last forever. You may never need it, but it's worth having on hand. I can't stress enough because, quite honestly, things do happen out there, and you really need to plan for those types of things happening, meaning maybe the yeast hit the wort too hot. I've known plenty of people that I've talked to over the years. Did you take a temperature reading out of these? No, it felt kind of cool. Well, that's not exactly accurate. So just be aware of that. Just have an extra packet of yeast on hand, and it'll make your life a lot better. That's all Hydrometer Readings is about. If you want to know the equation, one that I've used for years, although I tend to use software now, computer programs, but it was take your original gravity or starting gravity, which in our case was 1042, and subtract it from the final gravity, which we'll just say was 1010. You get that number, and then you take that number and divide it into 0.792. That should get you a pretty accurate percentage of alcohol. So otherwise, again, online all over the place, you can even type in, 1.042 SG and 1.010 FG and type that into any search engine, and a lot of times it'll pull up what that number should be at the end. But hope you enjoyed everything and enjoyed the series, and I'll have even more posts on some of the equipment that comes in the beginner kits, but hopefully you have a little bit better understanding how a hydrometer works, because this is a tool you really need to know how to use. Thanks for watching. This has been Mike with beerloons.com, and we will catch you next time.